Thank you for having me here. I do serve as the Chief Juvenile Probation Officer for Fort Bend County. We're not as big as the Harris County, obviously. I have an 80-bed maximum secure juvenile lockup. We service about, we get about somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 referrals a year, all in different types of offenses. I do also serve on the new board, the Texas Juvenile Justice Department Board, which was part of the consolidation between the Texas Youth Commission, the former Texas Youth Commission, and the former Texas Juvenile Probation Commission. And this happened December 1st, and it's been a pretty interesting ride. The facilities, which Al Price is now closed, we also have closed the Crockett facility, and we're looking at closing some others. Through the state, you have seen a drastic reduction in commitments to the state, a drastic reduction. In 2007, we were around 7,000 kids incarcerated. We're now at about 1,100, and our projection is to go below that. Next year, we're looking to be around 800 kids incarcerated throughout the state. A lot of that is due to the local juvenile probation departments. We have really done a pretty good job in identifying some of the problem areas, why we committed and acted accordingly. And also we did get some diversion funds from the state, which we put to good use. Fort Bend County gets around $400,000 a year to divert kids from the state, and a lot of that goes to good use. It's actually more cost effective and more effective altogether if you can not commit the kids to the state facility. It's actually better to work with them within the local jurisdictions as best you can. Some of the problems we have, I'm fortunate, the department I work at is I've got a great juvenile board, very supportive of our endeavors to rehabilitate kids. But what you'll see across the state is those departments that have more resources, you'll see less commitments to the state. Those departments, generally the smaller departments, don't have the resources to place kids in a residential setting, so the state becomes kind of a default placement for them. So what you'll see is a small juvenile probation department kid will run the gamut of their services, less placement, and if they're on a felony probation and continue to violate the probation, there's a good chance they'll end up at the state system. Whereas you take the larger departments, they'll find the resources, they'll keep placing them to the point where they throw their hands up and say, we just can't do anymore. And that usually is not that many kids. And we commit about 10 to 11 a year, which is not many, considering years past we were committing up to 30 and 40 a year. So we've dropped down. I'd like to see the number actually go to 0. But it's unrealistic because when you get kids on high sanctioned felonies, murders, assaults, aggravated rapes, then it sometimes puts you in no choice because a lot of the residential treatment facilities simply won't take them. The other problem we have is mental health. Residential treatment centers that we contract with, I contract with around 40 of them, probably use about 10 of those 40 on a regular basis, but we run into the problem with children that are either too mentally ill or their IQ is below threshold of 70. And when we encounter those kind of high needs with these juveniles, it puts us in kind of a corner because you can't get them placed. Residential treatment centers as a whole will not take them unless their IQ is above 70 and they don't have significant mental illness or mentally retarded. So there are those cases that we get from time to time that we are really feel like our hands are tied and wish we had more resources. Probably the biggest thing right now that I'm concerned about, well actually there's two things. School. When we get juveniles into our system, they're generally about 2 grades behind. 2 grades, some more. And that's significant because a lot of them have just simply given up. They don't care. and as a result, they're very, very close to just dropping out or entering into the juvenile justice system. I ran a study years ago, 2 years ago, to discern how many juveniles with chronic truancy eventually end up in the juvenile justice system, and it's right at about 99%. That's huge. So when you look at school as a major factor of why kids will end up in your system, you got to look at truancy, and you got to look at some of the issues that happen at school where the kid kind of detaches. When they get about 2 grades behind, they start losing more and more interest to the point where they just flat give up, and school is not a priority for them. But being that truancy is just about 100% correlation in the juvenile justice system, we started looking at the linking, creating our own truancy case management system, where we now have a truancy court dedicated to all the schools in Fort Bend County. We have probation officers that serve as case managers. We have a unit of 8 officers that will work case management with the more chronic truants at the direction of Judge Shaw. And we're about 80% successful in getting those kids turned around and rerouted back into school. And that's 80% that will probably not end up in the juvenile justice system. We've got to run this program about 4 years to really have an idea of just what an impact we're having with diverting kids through putting them in the truancy court system and putting probation officers actually working with them in the school. We're well received. The schools really enjoy the probation officers coming, walking the halls, talking to the youth. From what the principals are telling us, there's probably a ripple effect in the sense that these kids will not end up becoming a problem anymore. A lot of kids see the probation officers on campus, and it has probably, which we can't measure, a very dissuasive factor. With that being said, there are a lot of problems with the state facility. I sit on the board. I have toured almost all of the facilities, and there has been a lot of media accounts on the problems with the state institutions. The director, Sherry Townsend, recently resigned, and now we have a interim director. Jay Kimbrough is going to serve probably until we find a new director. We're looking at having a new director by October is our goal, is to get one in there. The problems that we've encountered in the state system, this is from my perspective, and I try to be a transparent in everything that I do, and the state is no different. I did tour the Giddings facility. We had gotten reports that things were a lot of problems there, and there was a former employee had written a letter complaining about the problems. There was a lot of blogs written about it, so I went to Giddings facility unannounced. The director, right off the bat, told me he had lost control of the facility, and then opted to stay in his office and didn't want to go with me as I toured the campus. I took 2 of my probation staff with me, our replacement supervisor and our compliance officer, and I asked them to interview 8 of the youth that we had from Fort Bend County that were currently being at the state facility. While I, in turn, as a board member, went and toured the facility and went to, as reported in the media or in the blogs, the more problematic dorms. That was Unit 10 and Unit 6. Words can't describe what I saw. It was the most dysfunctional facility setting I've ever seen in my entire history with juvenile probation. The kids are pretty much running amok. I learned a new term there called the mean mug, where the kids would try to stare you down. They weren't very accommodating. They called us suits, and suits aren't liked. Had one kid, a group of kids, they weren't walking in an orderly fashion, which I'm used to. Our kids always line up and walk in orderly fashion. And a lot of it's for safety. If you let them get too far out of line, they might turn on each other or pay back somebody for something. So it's best for safety and security to keep kids in a tight formation. But these kids were just running in a group. As I was talking to one of the staff sitting in front of the gym, one kid actually picked up a rock, smiled at us, and threw the rock. Fortunately, it sailed over my head because I was like, I'm too old to be having to wrangle with some kids at this. You know, it was really, I've never had that happen where you're a visitor on a campus and the kids will throw a rock at you, and the kid just ran by laughing into the gym. Obviously, and talking to the staff, they all admitted that the control had been lost of the units, and they said it wasn't just specific to Giddings. There were other facilities that were having problems too. So, staff were scared. One staff broke down and just started crying because she was too scared to work there. I did ask to see the security video of some more graphic assaults. Staff were being assaulted on a regular basis. One guy, Mr. Mahala, was thrown to the ground. I watched the video. He was beaten and kicked for about 5 minutes. And if you've ever been beaten or kicked, 5 minutes is a very, very long time. It took security almost 18 minutes to get there to his aid. It was actually one of the residents, a small statured youth, actually managed to break up the fight. The two female staff were pretty much helpless. This 40-year-old man was on the ground being kicked and beaten to the point where he had to have a titanium plate. It had actually busted the orbital bone that goes here. It was beyond repair, so they had to go in and replace it with a titanium plate. Walking out of there, I was pretty shocked. I mean, I actually thought I was going to have to fight my way out of there. It was that bad. The kids were all giving you the mean mug and stare. I immediately, and I was there all day, I was so upset with what I witnessed. And again, you had to be there to see the utter chaos that I saw. A director that had pretty much given up. Gangs, very, very gang-controlled environment. In fact, the kids that we interviewed said that, and I quote, "We run this shit." Tattoos were everywhere, which is bad because they've got good programs, especially good vocational programs. And if a kid gets a certificate of technology in one of the many trades, but as I witnessed, a lot of the kids had the gang tattoos. One kid had an MS-13 tattooed across his brow. Another kid had a kind of a gang face that they had all put on themselves while they were at the facility. There seemed to be no control of the tattoos that they were giving. You get a certificate of technology, but who's going to hire you? I know I wouldn't hire anybody that had a gang tattoo stapled across their forehead or gang types tattoos across their body. One kid in particular who had no tattoos while he was at my facility was covered in them. So I asked him to count. I said, count them. And he got to 13 tattoos that he had put on his place. This is while I was touring the Evans facility. Then he goes, "Chief, I forgot," pulls up his shirt, had another tattoo across his stomach. It was out of control. It was to the point where I was not comfortable. I even thought about resigning from the board because I just didn't feel that this was, I was just very disappointed, to say the least. I was extremely disappointed and very upset. I wrote up my findings and I reported to the vice chair. Our chair was having health issues and had asked for an emergency board meeting, which I was denied. Long story short, we eventually have, the awareness is out there that the facility is in turmoil. The first priority is safety and security. The residents need to be brought under control. The staff need to feel safe in working there, and we are making very strong efforts to bring the state facilities under control. Mr. Kimbrough comes with good experience, and we're looking to, in fact, he's done a lot already into bringing control to the facilities, which brings a question, what direction are we going to go now? I know that there are a lot of juvenile departments are saying we're not going to commit any more kids. And that's a good thing. If you can do it, if you can avoid committing them. My judges are aware. The problem that I saw with the state facilities, and they have good programs, it's not that they're lacking in good programs. Some of the welding shops, carpentry shops, drafting shops, very well resourced and a lot of good, just top-of-the-line shop equipment. The problem comes into accountability. You can have the best programs in the world, but if you don't have control of your clients, it's all for naught. You're not going to do very well when you're trying to get these kids to rise above whatever situation they're in into a proper vocation when they're, the environments are getting controlled. That's coming to an end. And now the question is, where are we going to go as a state agency? What direction are we going to take now that there's full awareness that the facilities, what we were doing wasn't working? Staff morale is about as low as I've seen it. And there's problems with staff too. We saw a number of staff that were, I guess for lack of a better term, rogue. Didn't really seem to care. They dressed like gangsters themselves. There was no dress code for staff, which I just found incredibly perplexing as to why staff who are role models, who act as authority figures, were dressing as the kids would when they were on the streets. Again, that's being addressed by Mr. Kimbrough, and it's not an overnight fix. Obviously, it's going to take a long time to get this program, these state facilities under to where they're actually functioning in a good way. I don't know at this point what model we're going to adopt. There's a lot of good things out there. I know that there's been a lot of discussion of the Missouri model. I've been and saw the Missouri model. I like it. They put the kids in smaller units, whereas you take the Giddings facility, it has 300 kids. You take the Moore facility, about 300 kids. Take the Evans facility, it's about 150 kids. That's a large number of kids to be putting into one environment, a large number. What the Missouri model has done is broken them down to 40 unit facilities. And while it may seem more expensive to do it that way, the reports are very good that it's working. And I was very impressed when I saw it, talked to the kids. All had been there for felonies and some pretty serious things. But they had, under this smaller milieu, had done very well. One good thing I was impressed with was the state was their mental health program in Corsicana. I was actually pretty impressed that the staff there, it just seemed to be a whole different environment. They seemed to really care about the kids. So it was a very shining light in the midst of all this turmoil of what is occurring in Corsicana, which I wish we had access within the overall for all the juvenile probation departments. One of the things that, when we were tracking that about 20, sometimes 30% of the youth that come into my department, either as a direct referral to the detention center or as a referral that we decide not to keep in detention, about 20 to 30% has a significant diagnosable mental illness. And what we're finding is a lot of them are not getting services before they come to us. So I've been described, juvenile departments have been described as a default mental health system. Our detention center in many ways resembles a mental health facility. I have a large entourage of clinical therapists on staff that are linked into the detention center. They're the busiest unit I have right now with all the therapy that they do, all the mental health tracking. They do family counseling. They do just a large number of mental health tasks that you would probably not think a juvenile department would have. But thankfully, I have a juvenile board that has recognized that need, and we have more licensed therapists than actually the mental health authority in our county, if that tells you something, and they're busy. I have been advocating for years that something has to change. I have written a proposal where the Southeast Chiefs Association, with about 25 counties, that we develop a pilot program to divert kids, mentally ill kids, from detention centers. I never felt that was a good setup where you put significant mentally ill youth in with your general population. And believe me, we've had kids that you would see in probably the worst of the psychiatric hospitals. We had a youth recently. The kids eat with something called a spork. It's a combination of a fork and spoon with a little bit of points on it. But we had one kid that just seemed like every day we were taking this kid to the doctor because he would injure himself. And he had several mental health diagnoses. He wanted to stay in a psychiatric facility. The last gesture he did was he actually crammed the spork up in his nose and rolled it around up into the nasal cavity to cause excessive bleeding, which caused us to take him. He got his wish. We ended up putting him in a hospital, and once they got that under control, he was put into a psychiatric facility. They don't keep him long. He was there about a week, and then we were back there getting him again, and then the whole thing starts all over again with him, all because he wants to go to psychiatric hospital. It's really kind of maddening to have to, deal with this on a regular basis. And what I had proposed, and it's still out there, and I've made the rounds trying to get support behind it, was we have a mental health treatment facilitator for each Chiefs Association. There's 7 Chiefs Associations, between 20 and 30 counties in each one. And then we create a pilot program where we have a mental health treatment facility where mentally ill juvenile offenders, rather than staying in your detention center for treatment, would actually go to a therapeutic environment, a more appropriate setting for mentally ill juvenile offenders. It seems to be gaining a little momentum, like anything else. I'm not a patient person, but I've learned in county business and in this business, you got to learn to be patient. Things don't just come because you want them to come. You have to just stick it out, keep plodding along, and eventually you will get to a point where whatever you envisioned will come to fruition if it makes sense. And that's kind of where we're at now, is trying to get a mental health treatment facility. One thing that sets juvenile departments apart from adult probation is the fact we deal with families. And families are key in this. And the families that we deal with are largely more problematic than the youth. And with the dysfunctionality of the family, it's no wonder that the juveniles, that their children, end up becoming part of our system. A lot of the attitudes that the parents have, you fix a little bastard, and when he's fixed, give me a call, I'll come get him. We get that a lot. Especially in our parenting program, we have kind of a boot camp for parents, where parents, any child on probation, their parents will be ordered into the parenting program, usually a single mother, where they go through a 10-week-long course where they are taught how to deal with their child, how to deal with a delinquent youth, how to deal with just being a parent. A lot of them never had those skills to begin with. There's usually resistance in about the first 2 weeks of the class. I don't want to be here. I'm not on probation. My son is. We go through it all, but after usually about the 3rd week, they start bonding and develop a network with the other parents, and then it becomes really effective. And we're seeing good success with that as well, which is a good concept. And I'm always open to anything that we can do to better these juveniles' lives, because we have a narrow window to work with them, 10 to 16. After they turn 17, they're part of the adult system. And it's, you want to work pretty hard knowing that you have a very limited time. Recently, I was in court the other day. I'll show you the picture of this young man. This young man we raised since he was 10 years old. He's been in our system since he was 10. And quite frankly, I didn't think there was much hope for this youth. He was constantly getting kicked out of school. The father, who I knew, called me, said that they don't know what to do. They're good parents. These are good parents, but this youth had so many mental health issues that he was falling drastically behind in school to where he was picking fights, doing just bizarre, crazy things to get kicked out of school. We tried everything we could at the local level, but we finally found a really good placement facility, which we've only begun using about 2 years, year and a half. And they did wonders for this child, absolutely wonders. He's now graduated high school. Turns out he's a very smart young man, very intelligent, but that was masked because of his mental health issues and his bizarre behavior. Very bizarre. I mean, he was destructive. He would kill animals, little small animals. He would do just about, he was into porn. He would go and, okay, good. He would, go to his neighbor's house and access the porn sites. He was into everything. But thankfully, this young man is off probation now. I was there where the judge dismissed him from probation. He got off a few months early. We helped set him up in a college. He's actually going to go to a vocational program. So even in the worst case scenarios, there is a light at the end of the tunnel in some of these. If you just find the right cocktail of resources or cocktail of medication or combination of either. But by far, I've done a lot of things. I was in the military. I've had my own business. By far, this career is about the most challenging I have ever been in, without a doubt. And I'm still scratching my head. We hold special case staffings every Wednesday with the probation officers where they don't know what to do with their particular probationer. They will come to this committee, and some of the situations are so bizarre that I'm scratching my head. I just don't know what to do. And you would think after 30 years in this field I would know right away what to do, but there's just those times where you patch something together and hope it works. I've got 2 minutes left, and I kind of hopped around, but I just wanted to try to do everything to kind of give you an idea of where we're at. Do y'all have any questions for me before I exit? Yes, ma'am.
What was the name of the facility that really worked for that young man?
It's in Grayson County. It's run by the Grayson Juvenile Probation Department. Yes, ma'am.
The parent boot camp you were talking about, do parents receive any kind of stipend for parents to have to work? Like what kind of covers that job basically?
We have it at night. We started at 6:30. No, there's no stipend. It's 2 nights a week for 10 weeks. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Mike, having visited a lot of these facilities, it used to be that Giddings was a real model facility. What went wrong with Giddings? Was it just leadership, or what are some of the things that sort of contributed to what happened when you visited?
There was a philosophy that, with the debacle that happened in 07 with the sexual scandal, that there need to be more gentler approach to these youth. Now keep in mind, these juveniles, for lack of better terms, are the worst of the worst. They're the ones that the county juvenile probation departments pretty much through their hands of, so we've done all we can.
And Giddings are the hardest kids.
Giddings has the capital offenders and your sex offenders. But what I think went wrong is, while they had good programs, the approach was too soft. For example, when I asked the question, why are staff dressed as they are? Why aren't they in some type of appropriate clothing? The answer was said, well, they're allowed to dress in a way where the kids feel comfortable in talking to them. That just left it wide open to where a lot of them they looked like gangsters. You walked in there. That's not appropriate. The accountability, the staff I interviewed at Giddings said there was no accountability, that these kids were allowed to run amok. I saw it. They also said that there was a huge problem with kids flashing the male youth. There's a lot of female staff, and they would expose their genitals to female staff. One staff member said this happened so much that she didn't even bother writing it up anymore, because what would happen is once they flashed the staff, they would go off and get counseled and come right back on the unit. Whereas if you were to flash yourself in public, that would be a Class A misdemeanor, and you would probably go to jail or something. But that's to answer your question bluntly. They just lost that the balance between accountability and programs was gone. It just wasn't there, and they had good programs. That's what amazed me. So I'm out of time, so thank you very much.